Hello beautiful, welcome back to my Chanel. Today I have a special announcement. I have lost 45 pounds so far in my weight loss journey. And I wanted to actually share with you my journey so far, including how I got to where I was.
Ooh, I did not expect that.
And how I have managed to lose my weight to get to this point now. So I want to share my journey about my weight loss experience because it has not been easy and it has taken quite a long time to get to where I am now. So I guess first things first, shall I start from the very top? That's probably the best place to start, isn't it? So, how did I get to put on so much weight over the last 10 years of my life? Well, let's go all the way back to 2010. So in 2010, I moved to London, and when I moved to London, I was weighing 9 stone and 10 pounds. So I actually consider that to be a little bit underweight for my height. My height is 5'8". That is 169/170 centimeters. During my time in London, I spent a lot of time in the nightclub scene, partying, drinking quite heavily, and generally going out and really kind of trashing my body. And because I was young, 10 years ago, I was 20, and I was just kind of like,
yeah, it's never going to catch up with me. I've got a really fast metabolism. I'm going to be skinny forever.
Spoiler alert, that didn't actually happen. And the universe had other plans for me anyway. When I first moved to London, I was relatively good. I was keeping myself on track with my weight. The problems didn't really start until 2012. And in 2012, I lost my mum quite suddenly. So she was very unwell. She was suffering from multiple sclerosis. And she had been suffering with that for the majority of my life. In fact, for all of my life. But it had never been that bad. She was bedridden. And unfortunately, I got a call one day from my dad saying, Mum has to go into hospital. And I raced down to Brighton from London at that point. And she went in on the Tuesday of that week, and she passed away on the Thursday. Very suddenly, although that she had been unwell for such a long time, I didn't quite expect her deterioration to happen quite that fast. So it turns out that she had cancer that we didn't know about, and it had infected her brains, lungs, and liver, and she was put into palliative care and passed away very soon after going into hospital. This totally destroyed my worldview and put me into a really dark place for a very long time. Compound that with the fact that I was struggling with my gender identity in the world at large, realising that perhaps being a London club kid kind of person wasn't great for the long run, as in I wasn't getting the places that I wanted to go to within the 2 years that I'd already spent there. And looking back at it now, I'm like, Lux, that was 2 years. 2 years? You can't expect to become, super well-known DJ extraordinaire in 2 years. That seems utterly ludicrous. But here we are, that's what I was. That's where I was living. That's where my headspace was. I thought I was something special, and the universe kind of did help me along, and then it all came crashing down. Sometimes that's just the way the cards fall. So after my mum passed away, I actually moved out of London and I moved back in with my dad for a while. And just before my mum had passed away, I actually met Andrew. So I moved to Brighton and back in with my dad to give him some emotional support because, the person that he'd been married to for 40 years was no longer there. That took quite a lot out of me to realise that at this point in my life, I felt like I was taking a step back from my life, taking, a step back in progress. And I'm pretty sure a lot of millennials out there can feel this way, that when you have to move back in with your parents, for whatever reason, it definitely feels like a step back in your life and suddenly you feel like a kid again. Except you're not a kid again, you're an adult with all these extra responsibilities and suddenly feel a bit under the thumb of a parent again. It doesn't feel very nice. I did not care what went into my body. I had no diet plan. I had no exercise. And over the next few years, steadily, I put on weight. Now, in October of that year, I ended up moving to Surrey with Andy. So still connected to London, so I could still somewhat have my party lifestyle, but also a little bit more like settling down. Looking back at it, I'd tell myself, don't settle down. Don't think that you're moving to Surrey to settle down. Don't take your foot off the accelerator. Just go and achieve your dreams. Because now I feel like my moment for my social media success has kind of waned a little bit. And now that I'm a lot older, my goals have shifted to different directions, which is absolutely fine. But I think at the time, if I'd have put a bit more effort into it, it would have been a different story. That's beside the point. So when I moved to Surrey, I ended up seeing my local GP and telling them about all the problems that I was experiencing. This sort of swathe of depression, this swathe of anxiety, everything in my body and my mind and my world just seemed a bit more effed up. And it was really difficult for me to deal with. So when I went to my GP, they immediately put me on diazepam, which is an anxiolytic drug. an anti-anxiety drug. And also they put me on citalopram. Now, I didn't react very well to citalopram. In fact, actually, I've never reacted very well to a antidepressant at all, really. Antidepressants are a weird part of the pharmaceutical industry that I think needs a lot more development. But they work for some people, they don't work for others. So I went on to citalopram and I was on that for 6 weeks. It was not working. We put the dose up, another 6 weeks, it still wasn't working. I then went through antidepressant after antidepressant after antidepressant after antidepressant, trying to find out the problems that were happening with me. And during this time, I kept putting on weight. I put on more and more weight and I didn't actually realize that this was happening to me. So the weird thing about me is that I never felt in tune with my body. I didn't feel in tune with my body for the longest time. I treated it like shit, and now I had to pay the consequences for that. I feel a lot more in tune with my body now, but back then I really didn't understand how to look after a body, if you know what I mean. The next time that I weighed myself, it must have been 2013, and I was up to 10 stone 9. I don't know what that is in pounds and kilos. I might put it on the screen here for you. At 10 stone 9, I'd started to get a little bit of the extra, jaw situation happening. I started to put on some weight around my stomach. My stomach is immediately where any fat on my body goes. It just goes straight to my stomach, straight to my chin and straight to my stomach, which is, it makes a lot of sense when you think about those are the places on the body that don't move a lot, but still, it could be nice to just go to my ass. During this time, I remember the longest time I was on a drug called mirtazapine. Now, mirtazapine is also a sleeping aid, and because it's a sleeping aid, it kind of makes you a bit hungry all the time. When you eat, you are never satiated, and my food intake just grew and grew and grew and grew. And I didn't really understand that this would have a negative effect on my body. Like, the need to eat was so much greater than my need for anything else. So I didn't care because I was on a drug that made me not care. When I started having side effects from mirtazapine, the side effects mostly being that I was drowsy the whole day, I ended up going on a drug called venlafaxine. I think it's also called Effexor. I think Effexor is the brand name. Venlafaxine is the chemical compound. This was the worst antidepressant I had ever been on. I immediately regret this, and I regret this to this day. I regret taking that drug. So that drug induced something in me known as brain shivers, which are exactly as disgusting as they sound. Now, a brain shiver is where your neurons in your head are firing and there is no neurotransmitter between the end of those neurons to continue the pulse down the neuron in order to produce a chemical reaction. That doesn't happen. So you get this sharp electric shock where the neurons cannot communicate with each other. And that was happening in my brain. And it was so painful and not fun at all. During this time, I also ended up having to go into surgery and having my appendix out because my appendix decided to burst. That was another thing that stopped me, that just made me just kind of eat lots, is just being like, unwell, generally unwell. And so coming off of venlafaxine was a really difficult process. And I remember Andy took me on a little adventure around the north of England to see his hometown and to stay at a few hotels. And I could not enjoy it at all. I was laying face down on the floor of the hotel, just in tears because of this brain shiver that kept happening. It would happen every half an hour. Every hour it would just be like, this brain sharp pain. And it was just so unpleasant. That's beside the point. I'm going to fast forward a few years now. During 2014, I actually came to the conclusion that I was in fact trans, and that I was going to transition from male to female, and that I was going to pursue HRT. Now, as any of you who are trans or have any experience with being trans, estrogen makes you hungry. The difference between a masculine body and a feminine body in terms of body fat composition is actually quite vast. So I was between sort of 2013, 14, early 2014, I was hovering at about 12 to 13% body fat. And over the next 5 years, I ballooned up to over 30% body fat. And at my absolute heaviest, I was weighing 14 stone and 4 pounds. At the same time that I began my transition, I decided to go to university. So all of these really stressful things are compounding, and I just ended up kind of breaking in a weird way. My mental capacity had broken, and I just sort of thought, I need to do something else in my life. And realistically, my diet had took such a massive backseat at this point. Before I got to start university, my best friend, Sinestra, passed away suddenly as hell in mid-2015. And again, my life was broken. My heart was broken, and my mental health took a further nosedive. At this point, I just didn't care. I was so unhappy with the way my body looked. I was so unhappy with the way my face looked. I was so unhappy with my life, even though I was still powering through with going to university and completing my transition, and now dealing with added grief on top of that, because it was actually Sinestra who was the final part in convincing me to go to university for science. If it hadn't have been for her, I might have done finance. So I also have a secondary, anecdotal conspiracy theory, if you like. I spent my time from 17 to 21 on a strict vegan diet. Not a single bit of meat or dairy passed my lips into my body. And I think at that sort of time in my life, between 17 and 21, those sort of developmental years in a way, because I didn't eat meat or dairy, I feel like my body had become perfectly accustomed to getting everything that it needed. And when I moved to London, I actually stopped being vegan and I introduced meat into my diet. First of all, I went vegetarian, and then I introduced meat into my diet and dairy and all sorts of things. And I just kind of feel like that compounded the problem of putting on weight, all the stress, all the depression, everything just kind of added up, and it eventually resulted in me just putting on so much weight. So when I finally went to university, I did actually stop partying because I never had any time off. I couldn't use my brain capacity for concentrating on anything else except university. Because I went back as a mature student at 25 years old, it was so important for me to do well. And because I stopped partying, I stopped seeing a lot of my glitter friends in London, and I really miss a lot of my glitter friends, and I hope to reconnect with them shortly after this is over, because I'm out of university now and I want to start enjoying life again. All the way throughout uni, as I say, I did not pay attention to what I was eating because my brain power was spent elsewhere. I would have been very depressed if I had not achieved my first class grade. That was what I was putting every fibre of my being into being and learning and doing and achieving. So it wasn't until 2018 I really realised just where I had gotten. And so at this point I was starting to look at surgery. I was starting to look at facial feminization surgery and getting trans-related surgeries. And for this, I actually needed to deeply analyze my face and my body and see myself from loads of different angles that I hadn't seen myself previously. I had to take countless photos of my face, my head shape, my body shape, and literally spend hours looking at them to see where I needed things moved, where I wanted things moved, and where potentially they could also be moved. I finally realized at that point, weirdly enough, you think I would have realised earlier because I do YouTube, but I hardly ever watch my videos back once I upload them, and when I'm editing, I'm concentrating on what I'm saying and doing and not really concentrating on the way I look. This is a bit therapy and a bit much. At this point, I really realised how big I had gotten. I was really eating the same diet as my bodybuilding powerlifting boyfriend who was 120 kilos at the time. Like, me, a 5'8" person did not need to be eating that much. So I made the decision at the end of May 2019 to actually put some effort into my body and trying to sculpt the future that I want. And I decided to do that because that coincided with my end of year exams, my end of university exams, May 2019, done. Completed everything that I needed to. So I decided to focus on what I can do to reduce my weight. Realistically, I did not want to be hot, I did not want to be sweaty, I didn't want to feel ugly every time I looked at a picture of myself and not even be able to watch my videos back because I was just like, oh, what have I become? So I made those changes. The absolute first thing that I did was find a tracking app on my phone that I wanted to use and that I got along with. So I've tried numerous ones. Specifically, I've probably tried MyFitnessPal and also LifeSum. I'm sure there's many others that I tried as well. I didn't like any of them. The one that I actually stumbled across, I actually got from Reddit, and it is called Lose It. Now, this video is not sponsored. I'm not telling you to go out and use this app, but this is the one that I really got along with. And the way that I started to make a difference to my life was that I was thinking, I'm going to be around for, a couple more years at least a couple more years on this planet. So I set myself a realistic goal. And I think the thing with weight loss is it's so tempting to just be like,
I need to lose 50 kilos overnight, girls.
And that is absolutely not sustainable. So what I ended up doing was sitting down and thinking, how much would I be happy to lose? How much would I be happy to lose per week without feeling terrible? At first I thought maybe £2 would be, and I tried it for a couple of weeks and I was like, this is just depressing. This is so difficult. So I ended up settling on £1 loss per week, which equates to about 1,850 calories per day. I realized that my, 7 years or whatever it was of terrible diet and body neglect could not be fixed overnight, and £1 per week was a good place to start. And if I lost any more than that, excellent, because some days you're just not as hungry as others. Now, 18,500 calories per day, 1,850 calories per day was actually very easy for me to manage. So I have always loved vegan and veggie food. I sort of always have interspersed it without my previous meat-eating lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. Recently, I have gone completely plant-based again, and I call it plant-based because it's slightly different to veganism. And I have found that Lose It has been a key component in me keeping weight off. So I started to measure out and plan every meal that I was going to eat every day. Now that sounds like a big ask, but it actually wasn't. I would just quickly do the maths and weigh out on a digital scale exactly what I was going to eat for that day. Easy, easy, easy. And this was actually a real learning curve for me because even though I'd done nutrition at university, even though I'd done biochemistry at university, it was still very much like I didn't realize just how much 80 grams of pasta is when you measure it by your eye, as opposed to when you actually measure it by weight. I decided to flirt with going plant-based for a few days a week back then, and I ended up falling in love with a product called Linda McCartney Veggie Sausages, which are actually also vegan. I don't know why she doesn't just advertise them as vegan. Let me tell you, they are delicious. They are excellent for macronutrients, they've got enough protein, they've got enough fibre, and there's only 140 calories in per 2 sausages, which is excellent. So I would then plan meals to be around about 500 calories. So, 80 grams of pasta, a handful of fresh green peppers, some pesto, and 2 of those veggie sausages would be perfect, like a 510 calorie meal. And then I could eat 3 of those per day and still have some left over for snacks. Massive improvement immediately in what is going in my body. I'm spending that little bit extra time thinking about what I'm doing and thinking about what was going in my body and what is still going inside my body. I figured that I'd overindulged for so many years that it was now time to try and satiate my taste buds whilst also contributing to weight loss. And varying that little recipe, that little one that I've just given you, that example meal thing, varying it daily by incorporating things like Thai jasmine rice instead of pasta or potatoes instead of pasta, really helped me satiate my taste buds whilst also contributing to weight loss, as I've literally just said. And I almost noticed results absolutely immediately. So it's kind of difficult when you are first starting your weight loss journey to think, am I actually losing weight, or have I just gone to the toilet more than often today? And over the weeks, I started to realize that the weight was shifting off. It came off faster at first and then plateaued, which is just completely normal with weight loss. I'm back down to about a pound a week now. At one point, I was losing 2 pounds a week. One point I was putting on a pound a week. Like, it just kind of goes a bit like this at first until it stabilizes out, which is perfectly normal, I think. So as of this day, I am 45 pounds down from a year ago, from May last year, and I am so happy with that, and I'm hoping that over the next year I will be another 45 pounds down. Moving on to a different subject. Sweet things. They are the absolute bane of my existence because I have an exceptionally sweet tooth. I had a very German mother who loved sweet treats all the time. And let me just tell you, it is so hard to calculate sweet things into your diet. So I had to come up with some really clever ways to make myself feel like I'd eaten something sweet without, diving into a pint of ice cream. Look, I ended up actually finding things like chocolate mousse. So chocolate mousse, I find, is like a weird little exciting thing where it gives you the sort of sensation of an ice cream lightness, sort of like creamy chocolatey dessert situation without being too overindulgent in terms of calories. So for example, the one that I used to use a lot before I went vegan was the chocolate mousse Sainsbury's own brand, and per pot it was 109 calories. So I could easily have 2 pots, be that 220 calories, and not feel like I've gone way overboard and like destroyed my life basically from eating something sweet. And I would really try and split those pots over the day. So I always find that about sort of brunch time, I get really like peckish for something sweet. I'm like, my body sugar is low. I feel like I need to digest an immediate kilo of chocolate, please. So I found that having just these chocolate mousses and actually really restraining myself and trying to eat them slowly really helped me get into a good habit of knowing to not eat too much. Habits form over time. They don't form instantly. So me doing this really helped. And now I can always plan my sweet things. So for example, I know that Oreos are actually vegan. Granted, over the quarantine that we've been in, I've been a bit indulgent, which is why I'm not at 52 pounds weight loss. I'm at 45 pounds weight loss. And I have actually been like enjoying my Oreos a little bit too much. But a way to try and avoid doing that is to count out as many as you want to have that still stays within that sort of like 150 calorie sort of range, and put them on a plate and decide, when I finish this plate, I can't have any more. And I found that so much easier to do than just scoffing them straight out of the packet, because before you know it, a whole pack is gone. Whereas if you divide it up, you can go, this is my amount. I can have as much of this as I want over the course of the day. And that is how you make sensible plans to move ahead. Motivation is the hardest part of losing weight, but if you stick to it, your body will be very thankful. Interestingly enough, I've managed to do all of this weight loss without really upping my exercise kind of at all. I mean, obviously at the moment we're not really walking lots, but usually, including work and walking to the train station and things like that, I was doing between about 1 mile and 3 miles per day. So when I get out of the quarantine, I kind of want to bump it back up to about 3 miles per day. So 3 miles is approximately 10,000 steps. If you're getting your 10k steps in, that's sort of like a good place to start. I know there's no science to back up going over 7,500, but if you want to just walk that little bit more, why not? It's not going to hurt you. So I suppose in summary of this video, I'm going to give you my top 3 tips for how I have managed my weight loss and kept myself on track, answering only to myself. Number 1, track what you eat. We have our smartphones on all the time, so why not actually make them work for us? You belong to me now, bish. Number 2, measure what you eat. Portion control is a really weird one because some things you're like, that is no way 150 grams. Lo and behold, it is. And over time, portion control will come more naturally to you. And lastly, make a realistic goal. Absolutely no one wants to lose like 5 pounds a day. That is just going to make you miserable. You're going to want to gorge more often. It's absolutely unsustainable to have huge amounts of weight loss instantly. It's just going to bounce you back. It's going to cause all sorts of other problems. Make a realistic goal. If you're going to be here, you know, for a couple of more years, we would all hope at least, then factor that time into your life and just say, I'm happy with losing ½ pound per week or £1 per week, and just be like, through my small efforts, I can make a big change over time to my life and my health. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was I. A sculptor spends time perfecting their work, and so should you. Okay, beautiful people, thank you so much for watching this video. Something a little bit different from me, but I just absolutely wanted to milestone this point of my YouTube career and say that I am back on track. And I finally have my jawline returning, which I'm very happy with. I've still got a little way to go. Probably about another 9 months to a year of just keeping up with this little plan and trying to make my life a bit better. Trying to get myself back to a point in my life where I felt invincible and accomplished. Okay, beautifuls, I love you so much, and I will see you all very soon.